In the last 12 months, we have seen significant price increases in a wide array of commodities. Copper prices at one point were up to $4.77 per pound, lumber was at $1,700, and steel at nearly $6,000. Now look around in the investment markets and you'll see what everyone is calling the Great Recovery. Since March 20th, 2020, the S&P 500 has returned a whopping 83%. Using that same date as a guide for the bottom in all markets, we can see that the same is true for various other sectors and investments. Bitcoin has since returned 473% despite taking a giant fall recently, and real estate has returned 15%, nearly 4 times more than normal. Now you can look around and find hundreds of reasons why, but to me and various other financial experts, the reason is clear. Inflation led on by the United States Federal Reserve. Some may call it transitory, some may call it downright hazardous. Whatever you think, it's here and it's already happening. One of the most prominent investors/fund managers, Cathie recently published a 40-minute interview on YouTube where she spoke about her thoughts regarding the dangers of inflation and how they're going to impact markets and the economy. In today's video, I break down her thoughts into a more digestible 10-minute video. What she says may leave you absolutely shocked. We start off with the money supply issue. As you know, the more you print, the higher the chances of inflation. And if you've been paying any attention in the last year, the Federal Reserve has had their printers running overclocked. Unprecedented amounts of money printing never before seen in history occurred. Looking at the infamous M2 chart, you can truly visualize just how much of a jump this really was. Cathie begins the inflation conversation with exactly this. Take a listen.
Now, the monetary policy side is also very interesting. The Fed, despite what everyone seems to be saying, the Fed is already starting to react. Interestingly, the money growth rate, so M2's growth, peaked in February at 27% and is now down to 18% on a year-over-year basis. I haven't seen it below the 20% range in more than a year, I think, or roughly a year. So that's very interesting. Anyone worrying about inflation will have to take note of that. 18% is still a very rapid rate of growth, but the direction has changed unequivocally. The other thing that happened this week is the Fed said it was going to unwind some of the bond ETF and outright bond purchases that it made during the depths of the coronavirus crisis. Now, this is only $60 billion, which is nothing.
So there you have Cathie essentially trying to make this claim that M2 has come down year over year. And while yes, that is technically true, her use of measuring this stat by using percentages instead of real values kind of dilutes the real issue. Let's go back to the actual chart so I can show you. What you need to know is that the money supply has been growing rapidly since about 2011. In March of 2020, where you see that line go straight up, we witnessed a spike never before seen in history. From about March 2020 to May 2020, we saw something absolutely unprecedented. The US Federal Reserve printed less money from 1990 to 2000 than they did in just those 3 months. And to make matters worse, the pace continued afterwards. Sure, it wasn't a straight line up, but look at the angle of the current line. It's a lot more steep than the decades before. The pace we are setting now is unbelievable. And if we don't get a significant inflation number as a result, then we really need to rethink the way we study economics. This goes back to this Keynesian idea that is starting to take over politicians who believe that instead of raising taxes, they can print as much money as they need to finance any idea they have. What we have today is people in office who truly think that they have an infinite money cheat code, and as they promise more and give people more, the addiction grows, especially if there are no consequences as a result. If you take a look at recent presidents, no matter what party, they have all driven up the national deficit, leaving taxes largely untouched. While many programs they try to install have good intentions, financing things with printed money seems like a miracle that would have been discovered thousands of years ago, not in 2021. This is why I think this clip of Charlie Munger, Warren Buffett, and Bill Gates in 2019 is one of the most important messages ever captured on film. Take a listen.
Well, sure, I think that if you drive interest rates down to zero and all the countries print money like crazy, it's lifted the asset boat for everybody. And I think it really is. So they didn't have anything else to do in the Great Recession, and so they took the only weapon they had and used it aggressively. I don't think we should quarrel with that. It did cause the people who were already rich to get richer.
Do you think we should still be using that weapon aggressively, which is what President Trump would like to see happen? He wants them to cut interest rates again, I think he said by 1%, and also push up quantitative easing once again. Build up the
I am
balance sheet.
so afraid of a democracy getting the idea that you can just print money to solve all problems, and eventually I know that will fail. You know, all these politicians in Europe and America have learned to print money.
And if we keep at these extraordinary measures for the Fed, I guess not just the Fed here, but central banks around the globe.
Yes, but who knows when money printing runs out of control? And at the end, if you print too much, you end up in something like Venezuela.
Over time, I don't know in what way, but I don't think we can continue to have these variables in this relationship. Now, if we can, then stocks are ridiculously cheap.
The one thing I will say, though, is this is a conversation I feel like we've had for at least 4 or 5 years.
Right.
Where you're watching and continuing to wait for these interest rates, the yields to rise. We're still sitting at 2.5% on the 10-year, which is shocking.
Yeah, and we're sitting with very, very little inflation with a Federal Reserve that put a target for 2% on it not that long ago. And it looks like nirvana. It looks like we found the promised land where we just essentially money doesn't cost anything, and you can print lots of money and have full employment and no inflation. And I would have thought that something would have happened before now. I don't know what would have happened, but I didn't.
Now, if they were saying this in 2019, can you imagine their true opinions in 2021? They must truly think that we're headed down the path of Venezuela. Now, I know a lot of people think of Peter Schiff and others like him as true outcasts and conspiracy theorists, but these three in that last interview are highly respected, truly remarkable investors who carefully choose their words. You can tell that even when Warren is talking about it, he's dancing around the line. We are living in nirvana. If the Fed says inflation is low and due to base effects and the economy continues to prosper, well then we, the United States of America, have discovered a miracle. True nirvana. By that account, we should all reduce taxes to zero, introduce UBI, unlimited healthcare, free college, and every other thing to try to ease the lives of everyone, because apparently printing trillions affects nothing and there are no consequences. Going back to Cathie, this is what she thinks about it. Take a listen.
Now, the reason the market is on edge about inflation is some of the indicators are coming through much higher than expected now. There are two reasons. We've been talking about this probably for the last 6 months. The base effect. Last year at this time, in the futures market, energy prices had just finished going through a negative session, which of course is not possible in the spot market. But that just gives you a sense of how much pressure there was on prices at this time last year. And today, oil prices are pressing up towards $70 a barrel. So oil and food prices are also flaring up. Again, supply chain issues, along with the recent hack that we heard about in the beef supply chain.
So there you go. Cathie is, from what I could gather, on the Fed side. She thinks that all these price hikes have their various underlying causes, all unrelated to the Federal Reserve actions. She goes and blames supply issues, the recent hack, and other news items that supposedly are causing everything to jump up in price. But the underlying issue isn't the money supply and ridiculous QE, but rather anything else. She mentions there at the end something called consumer psychology, and I touched on this in one of my most recent videos. Inflation, I believe, and there are others who agree with me, is a largely psychological problem influenced by the perceived threat of rapidly rising prices. If you can trick or alter public opinion, you can actually delay the effects. By how much and how far you can take it, nobody really knows. We and various other countries around the world are currently experimenting with policies that have never been tried before. And while every other respected economist would have thought that this amount of money printing would never be possible, they have been proven wrong over and over again. There is a limit, of course, but the US and especially Europe have pushed it out further and further, digging a hole much deeper than what was previously thought possible. Now they're getting stretched, and you can tell by some of their policies that they're enacting in China and other countries that they're worried. Take a listen to this extreme policy being enforced right now in the Far East.
Now, another reason for these price declines is apparently China is making some drastic moves to curb commodity speculation in China. They're raising taxes and fees, and they're censoring any article about shortages to prevent the scramble there.
So there you have China literally censoring articles pertaining to this idea that there are supply shortages. This ties into that inflationary psychology argument. If you can reduce the perceived idea that prices are rapidly rising, you can diminish the effects. This may or may not work, but enacting these policies here in the United States is difficult due to this idea that we have called freedom of speech and press. However, just the sheer fact that a country out there is doing this is evidence to me that there's a large problem underneath that they're trying to cover up. CNBC, Fox News, and all the other major finance networks are spending a lot of time describing every other issue with the economy and how it's influencing prices, but they refuse to talk about the biggest problem staring them right in their face: the money supply and the United States Federal Reserve. It's these guys propping up this entire house of cards, pushing everything, including equities, up and up. If you're worried about the value of the US dollar, considering the policies I described earlier, I would hope that you at least diversify a small portion of your savings into Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies. One of the best ways, in my opinion, is to use BlockFi, where you can earn interest on top of storing, trading, and diversifying your crypto portfolio. I currently keep about $5,000 worth of stablecoins, Bitcoin, and Litecoin using their service, and in just under 1 month, I have earned over $30 in interest. And the good news is that if you choose to use my link below, you will get up to a $250 crypto bonus with a deposit of $100 or more. This is a great way to earn some yield on your precious cash and crypto holdings, and it's not a savings account, but a totally different financial product that could be part of the answer to protecting your cash against rising inflation rates. Thank you guys for watching, and please make sure you hit that subscribe button if you enjoyed.